gosh, thank you.
As certified life coaches with 45 years combined experience in human resources, Jen Trumm and Katherine Fry have both experienced the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, both personally and professionally. And what they each know to be true is this: our mental, physical, and emotional health are the essential building blocks in order to thrive and shine in the field of HR. So in a first of its kind podcast, we'll be getting real and to discuss and share what has contributed to both our struggles and successes, with the goal of inspiring women around the globe to stand tall and take the necessary action to both thrive and shine in HR. Here are your hosts, Jen and Katherine.
Welcome to Thrive and Shine HR. Hello, listeners. Hello, Jen. Jen, it's so great to see you.
It's so great to see you, Katherine. Hello, everybody. It's just such a great day to be here. We are at episode 15.
15. Yes. What a treat. What a treat to be able to start Mondays off at Jen with us, with all of our listeners who are with us live on so many different social media platforms this morning, and obviously our listeners who join us auditorially when it's convenient for them. So exciting. I have a question for you before we even dive in. And I'm totally going to catch you off guard with this. What are you most looking forward to this week?
Work.
Yeah. Hell yes.
Work. I'm really looking forward to work this week. This sounds really, really wild, but last week, for the first time in 4 years where I work, which is the Ashland Food Co-op in Little Ashland, Oregon, for the first time in 4 years, we had all employee assemblies. And we didn't have one, Katherine. We didn't have two. We didn't have three. We had 6. All employee assemblies. They were about an hour each, and we did them all week long. There were about maybe 20 or 30 employees in each one. We have 160 employees total, but it's one little grocery store with 160 employees, which is one little grocery store. There's grocery stores out there with like 5 people, right? We have our own bakery and deli and all of that. But
Yum, I'm starving all of a sudden.
It took a lot of coordination to make it happen. And so anyway, this week is now kind of coming off the high of being able to share some really amazing things that we're going to be doing this year, some things that we've done in the past. And it was just like, it was a way to like bring everybody together and kind of come on the same page in a way that I honestly I've never quite experienced before in a professional role. So it was a really great week. And now here I am on Monday about to walk into this week ready to just get to work on, feedback we heard and things that we said that we were going to do. Now that we're going to do them. And I'm excited for it. So Katherine, turning the tables.
You just wouldn't believe the synchronicity of what you just shared, and one of the things I want to talk about today. So that's just absolutely wild. I love that because it ties so beautifully into episode 15. It really does. All about showing and telling, right? Showing versus telling, and why it's so freaking important that HR really starts to replace telling with more showing. I think that's just crazy. I think because I know I caught you off guard with that question, but yeah, it's just wild. So should we just jump in? What do you think? I mean, I could talk about the
I'm not going to let you get away with asking that question and not answering the question yourself, girly girl. So what are you looking most forward to this week?
Oh my gosh. I have a jam-packed week, which is so fun. I'm actually speaking tomorrow. I'm doing Ditch the Pip, one of my favorite workshops that I get to lead. I'm leading that for the California Central California SHRM chapter, which is fantastic. This has been in the works for a couple of months now. So I'm actually doing a dry run in my private Facebook community just to make sure I'm on top of it. So that's this afternoon. And then I am driving down to do some work with a client for 3 days. I'm doing a director's retreat with them this week. I'm doing a training on compensation this week. So I'm really looking forward to work today as well. This week as well. I'm really excited. It's jam packed, and I like that because it just keeps everything flowing. I'm super excited.
Absolutely. I love it too. I think, there was a past version of myself where I would be looking at a jam-packed week like this that I'm walking into and would not be feeling the excitement I'm feeling today.
Yes.
And I think it's so interesting now to kind of see the busyness in front of me, but being like so much more intentional and knowing that I'm not going to push myself over limits, that I'm,
Yes.
going to make sure that, I rush into that busyness, but I also recognize when I need to pull away. So yes, let's get into those questions, shall we?
Well, and again, I mean, you just exemplified exactly what we're talking about, because we talk about boundaries so much. We talk about not overworking. We talk about mental health in the HR space. And it's so important for us to be showing our employees we mean it and be showing them what that means for them, tying that to the organization, tying that to teams, tying it to their individual health. So yes, I totally agree. Let's stop talking about it, the irony, and let's talk about show and tell. So Jen, what are we even talking about? Can you explain the difference between telling and showing in the context of HR and why it's so important? What's the difference?
Absolutely.
What are we even talking about? What does this mean?
Absolutely. I think we in HR, we are hired and we come into these roles just filled with things that we're told that we need to communicate, right? We've got the handbook, we got policies, we got procedures, we got SOP manuals, we got safety manuals, we got, what am I forgetting? Right? Like it's on and on and on. Excuse me, in terms of what it is like we are loaded with. Literally loaded with in terms of our responsibility to make sure that people know and are aware of. And when you start adding on all of these things, that feels like a heavy amount of weight. And I think myself and so many others that I've talked to in HR, that heavy weight then creates this perception that we need to be the rule, the holders, right? We're
Oh yeah.
police officers within the realm of HR. And so we're constantly enforcing, we're constantly, slapping wrists, and it becomes this lifestyle of being in HR. And it, regardless of if you're in employee relations, if you're in benefits, if you're in recruiting, we're constantly, we have these rules and we're following them and we're setting them and so what I think that we end up getting caught into is like this matrix, right? It's this hamster wheel of like having this be weighted on us in such a way that we don't. I know for myself, I didn't even feel as though I had a choice when it came to like really stepping out of that matrix. And so it's like, as I start to kind of even process through, like recognizing how much the process of being in human resources can get us caught in this hamster wheel of having to kind of tell with all
Yeah.
of the policies and all of this. I think it then gets just caught up in webs of confusion. And so what I have really started to like learn over these past few years is like what it means to me to truly be in HR is to start becoming more curious around why and start to become more actively engaged when it comes to how we communicate our why. And that I think is where showing becomes essential, right? Because it's one thing to have what it is we're communicating and telling,
Yes.
all of that communication. And it's a whole other thing to actually be very invested and understand why it is we're telling what we're telling, and actually then be able to like start walking from that place, the whole idea of walking the walk. And I think it is very, very real. And it's something that for me, I'm still in it. I've
Yes.
like shared over and over again. It's only been within this last year that I'm really now kind of in an HR role, having the tools that I do as a coach. It's a daily thing. It's a daily thing where I'm having to check myself from being an old school HR teller to now a new age HR shower and learner and curious and understand and like all of those things. And that is actually something that takes practice on the daily. Like there's no other way that I can communicate that, because I spent 20 years in HR telling, and now I'm 1 year in HR, really becoming much more about learning, growing, and then showing and walking the walk. So that ended up being a super, super all over the place answer, but I hope that answered your question.
I mean, my mind just went in a million different directions, as it always does when you and I get together on this podcast. What you shared is so inspiring. I cannot relate more. I am right there with you. I was taught to be the HR person who told and told and told, here are the rules. I'm sort of the enforcer. And I love your language that you're shifting from being a teller to a shower, because telling to me, of course, I looked it up in the dictionary because I'm so old. I don't Google. I look it up in the dictionary. No, I'm just kidding. I did Google it. And telling, the synonymous word for telling is dictating, and the synonymous word for showing is involving. And I love how, yes, I love that distinction.
Here's to
And
that.
I think another thing you and I have in common, and maybe not, these are definitely my words, not yours, is I believe the way I was socialized as a woman was to contribute in terms of volume, how much I'm doing, the hours I'm working, how long I'm working, but also how much I'm getting done in those hours. And I have done a complete about face in the last couple of years, because now I understand it is about value, but I didn't see that I was undermining myself, and I was actually doing harm to myself, my mental health, my emotional health, my physical health, but also to the teams I was working with, the people I was collaborating with, and the organization. I truly believe that telling is detrimental to everyone, and showing requires us to slow down. It does. Telling's a lot easier.
Sorry,
Hey, go
friends.
do this, right? And it takes place in
Yeah.
2 seconds. Showing
Yeah.
takes more time.
Right.
But
Get her done.
get her done in the beginning, but then showing, I'm gonna try to articulate this as clearly as I can. It feels like it's taking more time upfront initially, but I promise that ripple effect, that long-term ripple effect of achieving what you actually want to achieve in your organization, it's actually the most important investment in time versus wasting time or spending time. It's a true investment in your staff. It's a true investment in your health. And boy, did I just go off in a direction I didn't think I'd go into. But Jen, you really inspired me. You got me thinking as usual.
No,
Huge.
you nailed it though. I mean, it is the true investment in your time, right? The easy, simple way is to just tell it, to be done with it and move on, right? It's easy, like, but
Yeah.
yet, like, really the reality of it is, and what you and I have learned through actually the practice that, we do, is by taking that time, by leaning in, by understanding, by having the curiosity, and then actually like learning from that place, I think, yeah, it shifts everything. It really does. It's like, it's so hard, right? Like here we are in an episode about show and tell, and I'm like, I can't just tell y'all. I
Right.
wish I could just tell y'all, but you have to show, you have to actually do it. You have to actually participate in this one, and that's like, as much as you and I, Catherine, can like kind of talk it through and feel like it makes so much logical sense for us. It's really not until we actually participated ourselves in this process that everything changed. So,
well, speaking of, can you give us a concrete example? Can you show us how you've been showing versus telling?
yeah, absolutely. So I shared with you in our precast that I went to a conference on Friday. So I went to a women's leadership conference that we have here in Little Southern Oregon, and they have it every year. It's been for about 12 years now, and I've been going for about 10 years. And 10 years ago was the first one I went to, and it was about 100 people who came. So still for like little Southern Oregon, it was pretty amazing to have 100 people come to this conference. Now in 2024, there was about 350 people. We're at the biggest possible place that you can
Oh,
find in Southern Oregon to have a conference. We're maxed out. And it was amazing. So a little bit about like the conference itself. So 10 years ago, the first one I ever went to, I was at that time in between HR roles. And that was the period of time when I was doing HR consulting. So I had burnt out on HR. I had said, I'm going to be a consultant. And at the time, I was out there trying to sell myself as a consultant. So here I was at this women's leadership conference with a backpack full of business cards and everything else to try to like, sell myself at this conference. And next thing you knew, I ended up in line for alcohol because I was drinking at this conference. It was the end of the day at this conference. And I ended up chatting with the sales and marketing director for a hotel group that was local. So the hotel group that was where the conference that we were at. And
yeah.
this gal was talking to me about how they had 300 employees with this hotel group, and they didn't have anybody doing HR. They had somebody who was helping
Whoa.
as a consultant, but they didn't
Okay.
have anybody doing it full time. The person who was helping as a consultant was the wife of the finance manager for the hotel group. And so
Classic.
she gave me their card and said, hey, can you give us a call? Next thing you know, I end up meeting with the GM of that particular hotel group. And a few months later, they ended up hiring me as their HR director. And I ended up being HR director for that hotel group for 4 years.
Uh-huh.
And that's where I ended up being for 4 years before I ended up going into coaching. And so on Friday, when I went to this now 350 people
Yes.
HR conference, Dawn, who is the general manager, who was my
Come on.
boss for 4 years at
Come
this
on.
hotel group when I was HR director, was at this conference. Not only was he at this conference, when you work in hospitality, anyone who's listening right now, if you've ever worked in hospitality, y'all work events. I don't care if you're the GM or you're the HR director, you work events, right?
Yes,
You
you
don't have
do.
enough people to work the large events, especially when it's completely maxed out. So
Yep.
there was my old boss, Don, serving coffee, clearing plates, just doing his servant leadership thing at this conference, right? And here I am
Amazing.
sitting at a table, living my very best life with one of my managers now at the co-op that I work at.
Yes.
And really like seeing the growth in myself over these last 10 years from
Mm.
the person who my boss, Don, had met 10 years ago versus the person who I was sitting next to that I was that I am HR manager for now. And the showing that I was doing with this individual at this conference and really being there and participating and engaging and being vulnerable versus like how different. So Dawn ended up coming over at one point. We ended up chatting. I
Wow.
I kind of put him on the spot, for a moment, and I said, "Hey, Dawn, I bet you have a few stories of like 10-year-old, 10 Jen 10 years ago." And he laughed hysterically because Jen
Yeah.
10 years ago had a fuse. Jen 10 years ago had no patience. Jen 10 years ago had a lot of growing to do. And so how wild is that, right? At a women's leadership conference, here I was with my boss, who is one of my like most amazing mentors now. Like, we were supposed to go to lunch today. We're going to lunch next week.
Yeah.
Most amazing human on the planet, one of them. So it was like, talk about a full circle moment. Talk about a moment where I could see my past, I could see my future, and I could see my present all in one room, stuffed room, where I used to work with like, all of it was just so beautiful. And it like reminded me of how every single one of us at any time have an opportunity to change the narrative, to change that story that, we are telling about ourselves at whatever chapter we're in our lives. I was able to see it all converge in my own life, 10 years in one moment. And I think I truly believe that many of us just sell ourselves short around that. Like, we do not believe that we actually have that capability of showing something different than where we're at right here, right now. And I think that narrative it absolutely has to be blown up. And so we're going to get into that a little bit, but that was my specific example. That was a banger. I'm so happy I had that opportunity to have that experience on Friday, and then knowing this episode was coming up on Monday. I've been chomping at the bit for that all weekend. Okay, well, what about
Oh my
you?
God. Well, I can't just not comment. Like, so you're showing how you're showing up differently. Instead of saying, I've changed, like, quite literally, I've evolved.
Yeah.
I'm a different human resources professional. I'm a different woman. I have evolved as a human being. You're showing people, and it's evident.
Yeah.
You're not using words, you're showing.
Thank you for that
It's how you're being, right? What?
Yeah. Thank you for that summary, because I think that got lost in all of my like, blah, 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 blah.
No, it's so interesting because as you were sharing that, I was flashing back to a couple of same thing. A lot of my initial coaching clients were women where I live who would contact me and say, you're different, you're happy. And not that I was unhappy, but it was this different level of just being content and at peace and not running around with a chicken with my head cut off. Because quite literally, on my lunch breaks, when I was in HR and I was at the height of my burnout, I was quite literally running. I would run into the grocery store. I was shoveling food down. It was just this go, go, go. And in my mind, I thought, well, I just have so much to do as this first ever department of one. There's not enough time in the day. And the way I was I was telling people I'm here, I'm committed, I'm competent. And yet what I was showing them was something entirely different. I was showing them I was super stressed out. I was super burned out. There was too much to do. I mean, so it's just crazy. It's just crazy, the example that you just gave. And then fast forward to people who actually hired me to be their coach. They're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. What elixir have you been taking? I want some, right? And it's like, sure, yeah, I can teach you, all of the techniques that I've implemented in my life to slow down so I can be more impactful. So yeah, I love the example that you just gave. For me, where I've successfully shifted from showing to telling, I guess that's an example. But when you were first giving your example of, what did you call them? The events that you had last week, all hands? You didn't call them all hands. What did you call them?
All employee assemblies.
All employee assemblies. Oh, I love that word, assembly. I love that. So in my last 9 to 5 HR role, I was the first ever HR person. And my boss at the time, he and I went around department to department. I think we had about 10 or 11 departments. And we went around and we would listen. We would listen to their ideas. I was taking copious notes. And when my boss and I convened afterwards, I was like, okay, here's a list of everything. that I heard, and here are some solutions that we heard, or here are some solutions that I heard, right? So, and he would say, well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, next is action. We need to be taking some action. And he just didn't believe in that next step. He subscribed to the belief of, well, people just want to feel heard. And that, in my mind, I was like, well, what do we mean by feeling heard? Is feeling heard just listening to people, or is it showing them that we're listening? And to me, the next level is showing people that we're listening. So what I have done is I've taken that concept into my HR consulting role, and the organization that I happen to be spending a lot of time with this week, it's really cool what they've done. I've never seen this done in an organization where it truly is employee led. So right now we're working on goals for 2025. And we quite literally at last month's training in April said, what do you think the organization's strategic goals could be? And this is new to them too. They have never been asked for their ideas. So we're not just saying, we're not placating, we're not just telling them, hey, we really want to hear your ideas. We're showing them. We had an hour of intake of ideas. Then the department directors went back to the employees and said, we weren't shitting you. We want to know what you think. So we're going to continue that conversation this week before we actually put pen to paper at the director level and put those ideas into play. So that's just another example of, if you are saying we want you to be innovative, we want to hear your ideas matter, you absolutely must shift from saying that, from giving it, what is it, wordsmith? That's not right. From verbalizing it to showing it. And that's just one example, in addition to Jen's example, of how you can do that at the organizational level.
So love that. I was trying to think of a good joke of word, how we could wordsmith something.
I need constant wordsmithing in my life. It's a lifelong need.
I think Daisy.
I mean, speaking of like, how could we do that? How could we wordsmith it? How do you think showing, because this is where my mind went originally with this topic, how do you think showing as opposed to telling really aligns with modern trends in HR technology like AI? Oh my gosh. Digital communication tools. I know there's like avatars that are out there that can do your trainings. They can be translated into a bazillion different languages. I'm just curious how you think this aligns or relates to tech, the modern trends going on out there.
Like I don't know too much about some of the big, some of the big programs or anything like that on the HR side. I have some homework to do for sure.
Love it.
But I can tell you from a personal perspective where I've really utilized tech and AI over the last several months. And I think one of the things that I saw in a conference several months ago is it talked about, there was a session that this was really early on with AI too, and it talked about how to utilize AI as your own mental health counselor.
What?
And it really and it wasn't HR focused, but the person, was kind of giving an HR twist on it and basically saying, hey, one of the things I think that but that we can really see as an opportunity with AI is that anytime, any question you have that you're struggling to solve within your heart, within your mind, we actually have something out there that has changed the game. So something like Chat GPT or any of those types of things have been like a game changer for me, not only with, how I show up on social media, but also how I show up in conversations. Like if I want to be intentional, I have a challenging conversation today. I'm going to go on Chat GPT first. And I'm going to say, can I get 5, ideas, or I'll probably like think about it. So what I do, this is kind of, you're going to hack into my brain a little bit, but
I
what I'll
love it.
do is if I know that I have a challenging conversation, or if I know I'm going into a meeting, I'm going to ask myself the one question that I think I need to know, which is, what is it I'm most hoping or needing to get
Yes.
out of this conversation or
Yes.
meeting? What is it I'm really, what is it that I see as a positive outcome from this? And then I'm going to let ChatGPT do the work for me around, what are the questions I need to ask? What are the things that I want to make sure that are, addressed? And
Yes.
those are like the hacks that I think, if we can like tap into that and really just be intentional within ourselves. I'm not even doing it out there, right? It has nothing to do with how this manager is going to behave or how this manager is going to show up. It has everything to do with self-awareness,
Yes.
self-control, self-regulation, and I love it. It is like my hack, and I don't do it daily, but I do it at least 2 or 3 times a week.
Oh my God, I love that. I love that. And that's so interesting to me because I mean, that's what I call thought work, right? It's
Mhm.
how am I, what do I want? I mean, that's just classic
What do
coaching
I need?
101. What do I want? And how do I need to be to show up to get there?
Yeah.
And I love that you're taking advantage of AI. I
Mhm.
think it's really important. I'm flashing back to, you guys will love this, the mid to late 90s. I think it was around when I graduated from college. Email became a thing. Email was not invented when I was in the early years of my undergraduate degree. It was
Mhm.
new. So to say, well, I don't believe in this email thing. I'm not going to do email. Can you imagine? So it's the same thing with AI. It's
Yeah.
like, okay, here's a new tool. How can I use it? How can I use it to my advantage? And I'm just learning too, Jen. I feel like a lot of us are. I don't have any friends who are like, well, I'm an AI champion. I know exactly, like, no. Um, and I love the way you're incorporating this. I do the same thing. I call it, Brene Brown talks about the shitty first draft. Just get your shitty first draft out there. And I use AI for my SFD, for my shitty first draft. And then it's like, oh my God, it's almost like for me having some sort of an admin assistant to be like, here you go. And then I'm like, now I'm gonna put my love all over this and put
That's
my,
ex
right?
that's so well said. That's exactly the way I see it too. Yeah, it's like the assistant and then your love. I love that.
Yes. Yeah. And what I think it helps us do as it relates to showing and telling is utilizing a tool to our advantage. And instead of saying, make your job easier, use tools differently. This is just one way. I mean, right now we're showing our audience and our listeners and our HR friends out there of how showing can be capitalized on via AI. I don't know if that makes sense.
I think so. I
Yeah.
absolutely think so, because, one of the things that we struggle with, it just came up at the Women's Leadership Conference, but one of the
Yeah, I
things we
love this.
struggle with is we just don't know how, right? Like, every single one of
Mm,
us has something about ourselves that we want to change. We want to change some way in how we're showing up. Everyone, right? Unless you're Dalai Lama. Like, there is something. And I think what holds us all back is not knowing how, not knowing where to start, and like those types of things, having community like this, having HR Empower Hour, like those are the answers, which we'll get to. But like that, I think, is where, so often where it ends up starting and ending, right? DOA. It's like
right.
that dead on arrival, because it's like, oh, fuck it. I don't know how. And so you and I think that's why we're here, is to like help rev up these engines and be able to say,
Yes.
no, you got this. We got you.
Yes.
We got you. And that's where I think this showing piece is everything, and why, again, I was so excited for this episode, because I'm like, yes, yes, we're going to, now we get to show up, right?
Yes.
This is where it's at, showing up.
Well, you and I are definitely there, obviously. And hopefully we've given some solid examples for our audience of how we've been able to make that transition. I'm just curious, how do you think, as HR practitioners, we can encourage other leaders in our organization to ditch out on the telling and incorporate more of a showing approach?
Yeah. This is a good one.
Here's the secret sauce.
Here's the rub. No,
Here
this is
is the
so
rub.
good. This is so good, because while I was coaching, so in my period of time where I was coaching, I had a client. Her name was Danielle, and she's still close to this day. She works for a larger organization, so she's HR, and she has several people within her department, and a few of them she supervises. So she has two people that she supervises, and then she's kind of the leader of that. And she's like basically the front end. They do like the onboarding and the new hire paperwork and all of that. So she kind of supervises that team. Anyway, she came to me because of why so many people come a lot of times when they're feeling burnt out and exhausted and over it, and they're actually thinking that they're looking for a way out.
Yep.
Right. That's why she came to me initially. And so she and I really started to work through a lot of mindset stuff over the next, month or so. And what she really realized through the course of us working together is how much she was really contributing to a lot of negativity. So within her office, so it was just her and her two employees in the office, in that room. And what she was noticing when she was starting to pay attention. So one of the assignments that she was given in our coaching together was noticing. It was going through that next week and just paying attention. You don't have to do anything, right? Like, don't do anything at all except just pay attention.
Yes.
Where are you at energetically, and where are those around you at energetically, and doing that multiple times a day, right? So that was kind of the assignment. She came back to that next week's coaching session. Her eyes were wide, and she was like, I need to make a change. We need to make a change. And so what she really noticed is not only was she getting caught up and participating in a lot of negativity and this and that and this and them, but she was also noticing that with her team, they were very much relying on that. That was a part of like their mini culture, right? Like their culture.
Interesting. Yes.
Yeah. And so their culture within their party of three was a lot of, us versus this department or this team or this group. And there was a lot of connection with one another felt through that. So first thing Monday morning, they would come in, and what were they bitching about? They were bitching about something. So Danielle was finally starting to like really see it. She was aware of it. She was acknowledging it. She was noticing it, yet she felt stuck, right? Because she ended up, so when we ended up having our next session that following week, it was after the Friday before she ended up snapping at her two employees in their department because she said, I was trying so hard to be nice about it. I was being respectful. I was saying, hey, can we try to be positive? Can we try to look at the bright side? Can we try to like see this a different way? And her two employees were like, no. They did not want nothing of it. They wanted to vent. It was a part of what helped them feel good.
So
right?
Interesting.
So she ended up having mutiny at the end of that Friday. She came in that next week when she and I met, and she's like, Jen, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Like, I have created this.
Yeah.
And so over the next several weeks, we had to unravel something. And when I worked with Danielle, it was like I was personally going through some major, major stuff in my life.
Yeah.
And the process of her having to unravel her own part in a mess that kind of has been created
Mm-hmm.
was the most personally profound experience of my life, hands down. Because when we actually have to take a step back and recognize our own part in the change that we're trying to create in our lives, that's some profound shit right there. That is some profound, profound stuff. And so through the end of our time together, it was several weeks later, it was still a work in progress, but she was doing her best to try to show up differently. She was working on, because she was struggling with it, like building up and then snapping, because she was like, I'm trying so hard. I'm trying to be a better person. I'm trying to, like, meditate and do all these things, but they're just, they keep coming in negative. And so she had to regulate that, right? Like,
Yeah.
regardless of the reactions of others, regardless of their perceptions of you, if you're going to make that choice, if you're going to choose to now show up as this different person, guess what, pretty? Guess what? You have to take that ownership. And so, anyway, that was a really long example, but like I still think about that all the time,
All the time.
because change and recognizing the change that needs to happen in our lives requires our own participation. And that requires showing up in a way that's very different, very uncomfortable, very very stressful and very
Yeah.
challenging, because a lot of times those people around us, like Danielle's coworkers, they didn't enjoy that. She was showing up as something that was not enjoyable for them,
Mm-hmm.
and she had to like hold that. She had to be patient with that. She had to allow that. She had to allow herself to not be liked for a while,
Mm.
right? That sucked. But she had me. She had that space where she could come and both of us could kind of ground in the fact that what she was doing was the right thing, and it was just going to be turbulent for a while. So, big breath.
Wow.
Big breath. But that is the joy of what you and I get to do, is have people who come to us who we can help transform in such powerful ways.
Right.
Where now today, here is someone who, this was 2 years ago, and she is still the different person that she was trying to become 2 years ago.
I love that.
So I love what we do, Katherine.
I do too. I do too.
How
It's
about you? Where does this take you?
Well, there's so much in there that I just want to talk about that for the next 3 hours.
I know
um,
it's 42 minutes in. I'm like, I'm so sorry that story was way long.
no, that story was amazing. And don't say you're sorry. Don't do that. Because as usual, it made me think of a bazillion and a half different things. And what you just shared was a great example of when a leader, whether it's an HR leader or an organizational leader, somebody in a whatever title it is, director, manager, supervisor, it doesn't matter. But when they come to us and they say, help,
Yeah.
I need help. And whether we're a coach, whether we're in HR, it doesn't matter. One of the first questions I ask, it's usually around a leader struggling with helping people change, like you just so beautifully articulated. And one of the very first questions I ask is, well, walk me through like how someone has reacted in the past when you told them to change. When you said you need to change, you need to show up to work. You need to get this in sooner. You need to be more productive. You need to stop micromanaging. Right. Yeah. So for those of you who are just listening, Jen like did this like block thing with her wrists. It's
The
resistance
armor.
right away. The armor comes up. That's exactly right. So for me, that pivotal question, and this is a great takeaway for our audience today, ask the person you're trying to help, right? Ask them. This is what I mean by showing, okay? How did somebody react? How did somebody reacted in the past when you told them to change? chances are they're going to say, didn't go well, right? So it just reinforces Jen's point of this awareness. It's like, hold up, stop trying to do the same thing, stop trying to tell, because guess what? It doesn't work. Neuroscientists, behavioral scientists, social scientists have all proven that when we take away our employees' autonomy, their ability to impact, their ability to make decisions, people shut down. The armor comes out. So this is why the showing is so important. And by showing, in my mind, it also means like showing people their minds, showing people what they're thinking, showing people how they're showing up, if that makes sense. So instead of saying you have to stop micromanaging, it's showing them how it would be advantageous if they showed up differently. And here's my hack for that. When I obviously get complaints often about micromanaging. I use this example all the time because it is something that in real life, I have a conversation about micromanaging all the time. I don't know who else experiences this, but for me, instead of saying, well, stop micromanaging, right? That's just telling. For me, the hack is to encourage the manager who is allegedly doing the micromanaging to have a conversation with the employee or the team and say, just like Jen, you just articulated, what do we want to experience? What do we want this collaboration to be like? What are we moving toward? And how do you need me to show up? And that is just, again, it's like it's showing the employee that we're ready to change, showing the employee that we do have a new focal point that's out there in the future that we're working toward, that we're aware that how we've been going about things isn't working. And instead of saying, well, you need to fix it, it's like, how are we going to fix it? It's sort of going back to that definition of showing being inclusive. It's being inclusive.
Damn, I love that. Anytime you can encourage inclusivity in terms of we, right? The we outcomes.
Yeah.
That is always going to elicit better responses when you're coming into it just thinking of self. Right? Like when it's, just looking at that other person, like you need to change, like you said. I mean, that's so, so powerful. And that resonates so strongly with me.
Yeah. Yeah. Susan Fowler has done a lot of work on the alignment, and Simon Sinek as well, but the alignment of the individual why and the organizational why. Mm-hmm. And just and taking yourself out of that very narrow lens and opening it up a little bit. So kind of going with that idea, Jen, how does showing really, how does it impact that employee experience and company culture? We already started going there.
Yeah.
Let's keep going.
Yeah, no, I think the showing, coming off this last week with these employee assemblies is like, it's hard for me right now to not feel really excited, right? Because that is showing at its greatest, right? Actually showing up and being there. We are, this is funny. I'm going to share this just because it's like transparency. But we, when I first started almost a year ago, we wanted to start doing what are called pulse surveys, right? We wanted to start doing feedback, and they hadn't done it in quite a long time pre-COVID. And even when they did it before, it was different, right? And so we did the first one when I started, we did back in September. We got decent participation. Then we tried to do it again a few weeks ago and we got abysmal participation, right? Like 20 something percent, of people, whereas last time it was like closer to 50. So at the assemblies, I really talked about it and I really wanted to make it conversational, my part anyway. And what I talked about is like, you guys, I get it. I get how giving feedback can feel uncomfortable. Sometimes we feel targeted. I get all of those things. And yet I'm here to serve you. my role in HR is to serve all, right? And I can't do it without your help. And so
Yeah.
these assemblies, again, I got to do it 6 different times. And so what was
Amazing.
so rad about it is like by the end of it, it was flowing. But
Yes.
it's so real and it's so true and it's so authentic. And never in my HR career did it flow so effortlessly than
Oh,
it did during these 6 assemblies where I could really share with them the why. For the first
mm,
time in my 20 something year career, I could like clearly, articulately, and very like very much from a place of like knowing that one, this information matters and this information is going to be used the right way and not as a tool because I've been there in my HR career too where it's like
yeah.
I was getting the data, I was responsible for receiving the data, but I didn't always necessarily trust what leadership was going to do with the data.
Oh,
Right, and
interesting.
I think a lot of people on here can probably relate to that, and so I'm very grateful to now be in an organization where the data matters in the right way. And so, all of that I was able to communicate in a way that just helped people to, like, feel like they wanted share feedback. For like for
Mm,
several of them, like after these assemblies, they were coming to me and they were just, I'm like, we have this survey out there, it's like on Google Forms or whatever, but they were just coming to me all week long, like, and
amazing.
not in a bad way. It wasn't like they were dumping negatively. They were just, starting to kind of feel free. They were feeling that freedom. And
Mm,
that's where it's at, right? That's where it's at. In
ah,
all my years of HR, I don't think I've ever felt more pride for being in HR than I did at the end of that week last week. And so I get to go back into it today. And I get to like show up now as, walking the walk. Give me your
mm,
feedback. Like that I think is something that I have not been able to do prior in my HR career. It's like, do we really want to know? Yeah, I do.
right,
Right. So there's
right.
so many parts of this that is very different now where I can walk right into it and be completely okay with whatever it is that comes back. And I think that is a showing up that is it's so needed. It's so needed. So I almost forgot the question. The employee experience in the company culture. I'm like, I think I answered that question though.
You kind of nailed that question. You did. I mean, you perfectly articulated, I think, the difference between a telling culture and a coaching culture.
Yeah.
Truly. You know,
Finally I got there. Yeah.
no, you really did. And it's just so fun when you share because I literally get these visuals. And of course, I've never been to where you work, but I just
Yes.
visualize you, with all of these employees at the co-op. And I visualize them coming to you and I visualize just how you're showing up and how welcoming and approachable you are. And that it's not about you. It's not about you. And that is the little golden nugget I heard in what you just shared. It's when we stop freaking taking things so dang personally.
F yeah.
Yeah. And because it is never personal. And I think once you understand that,
Mhm.
especially in HR, you're able to
Mhm.
show up in a totally different way. Your defenses, that armor will come off, your defenses will come down, and you will
Mhm.
help to be able to transition out of that telling culture that, well, we do it this way here. This is how we do things here,
Right.
right? Versus that coaching culture of, coaching is all about the assumption that the employee can get the answers themselves
Yeah.
and they do know how to do their job to the best of the ability. They do have new innovative approaches and solutions. And it's just opening the door to that. And it's all in the showing. And Jen, I mean, you just brought up something I didn't even think was even remotely connected to this particular podcast topic of getting out of your own way and not taking things personally because you will never be able to create a showing culture
Mhm.
if you
You're
make
making
it
it
about
about
you.
yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. So interesting you went there. I love that.
Well, what about you? Like, where does employee experience and culture come up for you when it comes to showing and telling, or was that your answer?
I think I just echoed exactly what I couldn't agree more. It's that approachability. It's almost that visual that I just had, that let's talk about this. Just because we've done it this way a million times, let's have the conversation. Here's our end goal. Here's what we're trying to achieve. If we're trying to increase our sales, maybe we're in a sales driven culture and that's really important to the bottom line. And we've just had it be this certain way, and there's consternation. The employee culture is bad. There's a lot of mistrust. There's a lot of blame and shame. I think it really goes back to identifying the type of culture that you do want, and then showing the employees that you mean business, showing the employees you're open to new ways, showing the employees that their ideas do matter because you're willing to take the time and listen.
Said it
I don't
so
know.
well.
That just came out of nowhere because of where you took the conversation, and I love this. I love that this is just such a fun conversation.
You gave me chills. That was good.
Well, I'm curious, just as we close out, do you have any specific effective strategies that you recommend to our listeners who want to maybe start transitioning into more showing than telling when it comes down to communicating within the organization? Anything specific?
Yeah. So I had shared with you in our pre-show that the conference that I went to on Friday, I took one of our managers from the co-op with me, and with someone who I just adore and I believe in so much. And one of the presenters during the conference talked about something that is very near and dear into my heart. And as they talked about it, by the end of their presentation, I knew without a doubt in my mind that it was the one thing that 10 years ago, Jen, to today has made me who I am today and continues to make me who I am today. So you want to know what that one thing is?
Yes, I'm dying.
You may not love to hear it, or listeners and viewers out there may not love to hear it, but the one thing that I think every one of us need more of in order to become the best, very best version of ourselves, meditation. It's so simple. And it's so, it's so like, people want a magic bullet. They want an elixir, right? We want to know which class, which coaching program, which teacher, which mentor. At the end of the day, it's you, it's me, right? At the end of the day, it's us. And meditation is like, it's beyond anything I can really describe in terms of the power that it's brought me. And it does not bring it in one sitting. It just doesn't. It doesn't bring it in 5 sittings. It does not bring it in 100 sittings. I think meditation really is an evolution over time. And what it brings to me is everything that, whenever you, Katherine, I love how kind you are, but every time, you praise like my ability to be grounded and find peace and those types of things, I credit meditation. I credit the ability to come back within myself. And that's completely 100% a practice that I have committed to. And I think, for those out there who are really looking for a way forward within themselves because of, whatever, causes us to not feel like we're showing up as our best, that's a really good place to start. And just keep doing it. And eventually you're going to get up one day and you're going to realize how much it actually is impacting everywhere else beyond that 10 minutes or 5 minutes. Everywhere.
Yeah.
And that's like the elixir that I think I didn't realize was in store for me in my
Yeah.
life. And so it's like, again, I could think of so many different tools and strategies and tips and tricks, but at the end of the day, it's right here. And it's every day. And
Yes.
it's checking in and it's being with myself and then being able to move from that intentional place.
Yes.
And it's everything. It's everything.
Yeah.
What about you, girl?
I love it. I love it. It takes practice
It takes
and
practice.
that
And
commitment. And yeah.
it's just not, yeah, it's not the easy fix.
Yeah. It's not the easy. There is no easy fix. I mean, I think about diets. I think about women struggling with their weight and their obesity and their body image. And it's not a product. I may get like murdered by the people at Ozempic, but it's not Ozempic. It's here. Like Jen, what you were just saying, it's in our mind.
Yeah,
And that's the
it's all
most
within.
beautiful. It's right there. And it's for me, I love meditation. I really, really do. And what I find is very much related to meditation. What helps me is the thought work, is choosing, recognizing, kind of going back to your example with your client of just noticing, take the time to notice. And for me, what I find most of my clients are wired just like me, that go, 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 got to get stuff done, got to prove myself through volume versus value. And
Oh yeah.
yeah. And what I have found is it feels so counterintuitive. It feels like, well, I can't slow down. I need to tell because shit's got to get done. And I promise you that when you're having those thoughts of, I can't slow down, I have to tell, we have to get it done, it had to be done yesterday, that is just your sign that things are not working. You're driving yourself crazy. You're driving other people crazy. You're driving the organizational culture into the toilet. I'm just saying like it is. And the very first thing we need to do, notice those thoughts. It's the very first thing. And just notice those thoughts that are leading to this tell that's driving everybody crazy. And just notice and maybe just try on a different thought of, I'm slowing down. I'm slowing down because I have to get clear. And I know if I show people in the short term, it's actually going to save us all time over the long term. And in the process, it's going to improve my mental health, my emotional health, my relationships with my coworkers, but also encourage people to show up differently and encourage the culture to shift in a really impactful and meaningful way. It's wild. It's wild what the power of the brain.
Yeah, the power of that brain.
Dang. Totally.
One piece at a time. And like the it's so interesting because the two tools that you and I just shared are free and they're the
Yes.
most powerful thing that any of us listening and watching could do for ourselves. So isn't that something?
Isn't that something?
Isn't that something?
I love it. I love it. Well, Jen, oh my gosh, what a really incredible conversation today. I know this was really impactful for our listeners. Thank you so much for this amazing conversation. And for all of our listeners out there, please remember, we would love it. If you got something out of today, we would love it if you would rate and review our podcast. And please share it. Please share it with anyone out there who could use a little pick me up every single week, because just remember, every day is a great day to thrive and shine in HR.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.